The $50 million yacht sat dead in the water like a floating palace with its heart ripped out, and Madison Blake was running out of people to blame. 30 engineers had come to Millbrook Harbor with laptops, scanners, toolboxes, and expensive promises, and 30 had walked away defeated, while the white hull of the Serenity gleamed uselessly under the morning sun. Madison stood on the dock in designer heels and a cream silk dress, diamonds flashing at her ears. But no amount of money could make the navigation screens wake up. No black credit card could force the engines to obey, and no lawyer could explain why the last thing she owned from her ruined marriage had suddenly become a prison. Then Jack Turner arrived with grease on his hands, salt in his hair, and his 6-year-old daughter Lily skipping beside him, proudly carrying a paper boat she had folded at breakfast. When the little boat slipped from Lily's fingers and landed in a muddy puddle near Madison's feet, Madison stepped back too late, crushing it beneath one perfect heel. Lily's face fell. Jack crouched silently, lifted the ruined paper from the water, and held it like it mattered. "It's okay," Lily whispered, looking up at Madison with innocent certainty. "My daddy fixes everything." Madison laughed, sharp and cruel, because she had lost too much to believe in miracles from men in faded flannel. "If he's so smart," she said, pointing toward the lifeless yacht, "then let him fix that." The dock went silent. Jack looked at the boat, then at his daughter, then at Madison with eyes that carried a grief she could not understand. What Madison did not know was that the quiet mechanic she had just insulted had once designed systems like this for a living, and by sunset he would discover the yacht was not broken. It had been sabotaged. Jack Turner did not answer right away. He only stood there on the dock with the crushed paper boat in his rough hand, the harbor wind tugging at the sleeves of his faded flannel, while Madison Blake's challenge hung between them like a spark waiting to find gasoline. Around them, the engineers who had just failed stopped loading their equipment for a moment, half amused, half offended, as if the idea of a grease-stained mechanic from a two-bay garage fixing what they could not was either a joke or an insult. The yacht towered behind Madison, all polished chrome, tinted glass, and white fiberglass shining too brightly against the gray working harbor. It looked less like a boat than a billionaire's dare to the ocean itself, and yet it sat there, silent, useless, mocked by fishing boats that cost less than its dining table and still knew how to leave the dock. Lily looked from Madison to the yacht, then up at her father, with the kind of faith that made Jack's chest hurt. She still believed he could fix everything. A broken toaster, a sputtering outboard motor, a toy car with one missing wheel, a neighbor's truck that had not started in 2 winters, maybe even a paper boat crushed under a stranger's heel. But children did not understand the difference between fixing machines and fixing life. They did not know that 3 years ago. Jack had sat beside a hospital bed holding his wife's hand while every machine in the room worked perfectly and still could not keep Emily alive. They did not know that after the funeral he had walked away from a career in marine systems design because blueprints and navigation consoles and corporate labs all smelled too much like the future he and Emily had planned and never got to live. They did not know that the little garage above the harbor was not the life he had dreamed of, only the life he could survive. Jack folded the wet paper boat carefully, as if preserving what was left of it, and handed it back to Lily. "Sometimes," he said softly, "things look worse than they are." Lily nodded with total seriousness, clutching the soggy paper to her chest. Madison's expression flickered irritation, shifting into something like embarrassment, but it vanished almost instantly behind the polished mask of a woman who had learned never to look sorry in public. "Well," she said, crossing her arms, "are you going to stare at it, or are you going to fix it?" The words were sharp, but Jack heard the crack beneath them this time. Desperation hiding under arrogance, fear wearing diamonds. He knew that sound. He had heard it in his own voice every night after Emily died when Lily cried for her mother, and Jack told her everything would be okay while knowing he had no idea how to make that true. He looked toward the yacht again. Serenity. The name was painted across the stern in elegant silver letters, cruelly peaceful for something trapped in the water. "I'll take a look," Jack said. One of the departing engineers laughed under his breath. Madison turned her head, cutting him quiet with one cold glance, then looked back at Jack. "You understand this isn't a fishing skiff, Mr. Turner," he said. "Jack Turner." "Mr. Turner," Madison repeated as if testing whether the name belonged in her mouth. "This vessel has a fully integrated navigation and communication suite, custom manufacturer installation, dual radar arrays, satellite-linked autopilot, encrypted remote diagnostics. 3 separate engineering teams have spent over 100 hours on it." "Then they probably checked the complicated things first," Jack said. Madison's eyebrows rose. "And you wouldn't." "I'd check the thing everyone assumed was fine. The engineers heard that." One of them muttered something about local mechanics, and Jack ignored it. He had spent enough years in rooms full of men with expensive degrees to know that arrogance was not always loud. Sometimes it wore a company polo and carried a diagnostic scanner. Madison studied him for a long second, then stepped aside and gestured toward the gangway. "Fine. Impress me." Lily gasped. "We get to go on the big boat!" Jack looked down at her uncertain. He should have taken her back to the garage. Mrs. Keller next door could watch her for an hour. He should not bring his daughter aboard a stranger's floating monument to money and trouble. But Lily was already looking at the yacht like it had sailed straight out of one of her bedtime stories, and Jack had become very bad at denying her harmless wonder. Life had taken enough from her. "Stay where I can see you," he said, "and don't touch buttons unless I tell you." Lily saluted. "Aye, aye, Captain Daddy." Despite himself, Jack smiled. Madison saw the smile and looked away quickly as if witnessing tenderness made her uncomfortable. They crossed the gangway together. The moment Jack stepped onto Serenity's deck, he felt the difference between wealth and work beneath his boots. Everything was immaculate, too clean, too smooth, too untouched. The teak deck had been scrubbed until it glowed honey gold. Chrome rails reflected the harbor light. The windows were dark enough that the town could stare and never see inside. A crew member in a crisp white shirt opened the salon door, and Lily stopped in the entrance with her mouth open. "Daddy," she whispered, "it's a hotel that floats." The salon was all cream leather, polished walnut glass, and quiet money. Fresh flowers sat in a crystal vase bolted subtly to the table. A staircase curved upward toward the bridge. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Millbrook Harbor like it was scenery placed there for Madison's benefit. Jack had been on luxury vessels before, years ago when he wore clean shirts and spoke in boardrooms about integrated redundancies and autonomous maritime routing. Back then, he had walked through places like this as a consultant, listened to wealthy owners complain about features they barely understood, then returned home to Emily and joked that rich people could make even the ocean feel rented. Now he entered with grease under his fingernails and his daughter's small hand tucked in his, and the past moved uneasily under his skin. Madison led them through the salon, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "The main failure began 11 days ago," she said, voice becoming brisk, controlled, almost grateful to discuss something technical instead of emotional. "We were making a short run down from Martha's Vineyard. Calm weather, clear visibility. Then every screen on the bridge went black. Radar, GPS, autopilot communications, relay, everything. The engines still functioned manually, but without navigation and comms. The captain refused to move her. "Good Captain," Jack said. "A cautious coward," Madison replied. "Alive, though." She glanced back at him, and for the first time, there was the faintest trace of reluctant amusement in her eyes. "You always this charming?" "Only on docks where people step on my daughter's boats." The amusement vanished into guilt. Jack regretted saying it, but not enough to apologize. They reached the bridge. If the salon was luxury, the navigation center was a command chamber. Curved consoles wrapped around the captain's station. Multiple screens sat dark in their frames, switches and indicator lights all dead. The helm looked ready to guide a spacecraft rather than a yacht. Lily climbed carefully into the captain's chair, then froze and looked at Madison. "Is this allowed?" Madison opened her mouth, probably to say no, but something about Lily's tiny seriousness stopped her. "Just don't steer us into Canada," she said. Lily nodded solemnly. "I don't know where Canada is, so I won't." Jack set his toolbox beside the main console and began the way he always began, not by fixing, but by listening. He ran his hand along the panel edges, checked the warmth of power modules, smelled for burned circuits, watched how the backup indicators failed to blink. He opened a lower access panel and found the wiring clean, labeled expensive, almost too perfect. Madison stood close enough that he could smell her perfume beneath the salt air, something floral and expensive. But underneath it he caught something sharper: sleeplessness, stress, fear. "You're not using a scanner," she said. "I will, but not first. Machines tell you what they know. Hands tell you what they're hiding." She went quiet. Jack pulled a flashlight from his kit and aimed it into the console cavity. The first 20 minutes revealed nothing obvious. No corrosion, no blown main fuse, no scorched boards, no water intrusion. The power distribution panel was healthy. The satellite receiver had signal. The processor stack had voltage. Individual components seemed alive, but the system as a whole behaved like a body that had forgotten how to wake. Lily watched from the chair, swinging her legs. "Daddy, why are all the screens sleeping?" "Because something told them not to talk to each other," Jack said. "Like when kids are mad." "A little. So you have to make them friends again." Jack smiled faintly. "Something like that." Madison leaned against the console, staring at the dark screens. The manufacturer team said the entire core would need replacing. Of course they did. That sounds expensive. It sounds profitable. She looked at him sharply. "You think they lied?" "No, I think people often recommend the kind of solution they know how to sell." Madison absorbed that in silence. Jack continued checking. Hour 1 became hour 2. Outside, the fog lifted from the harbor and sunlight poured across the bridge. Lily eventually grew bored and followed a crew member to the galley after Madison promised there were cookies. Jack almost objected, but Madison said, "She's safe," in a voice softer than he expected. He watched Lily disappear down the stairs, then return to the wiring. Without the child in the room, the silence changed. Madison stood beside him, no longer performing quite so hard. Her shoulders had lowered. Her perfect posture had begun to bend beneath exhaustion. "This boat matters to you," Jack said, not looking up. "It's worth $50 million. "That's not what I said." Madison's answer took a moment. "It was a wedding gift." Jack paused with one hand inside the panel. The marriage is over. Sorry." "Don't be. Everyone else pretends to be." That was the first honest thing she had said to him. He looked up. Her eyes were fixed on the harbor through the glass, but she was not really seeing it. He kept the penthouse, the estate that Jet half the company shares, and somehow still managed to convince the tabloids I was the parasite. Her laugh had no humor in it. "This yacht was the only thing that felt like mine, and now it won't move." Jack understood then. Serenity was not just a boat. It was proof she had survived the wreckage of her old life with something still under her control. And now even that had been taken from her. "When did your divorce finalize?" he asked. 6 weeks ago. "Any major service since then?" Madison frowned. "The crew handled routine maintenance in New York before I brought her here. Who had access?" "Crew? Manufacturer techs? My ex-husband's people before the transfer, I suppose." Jack's hand went still inside the console. A thought had begun forming, ugly and precise. "What is it?" Madison asked. "Maybe nothing." "That means something." Jack did not answer. He shifted to the secondary panel, the one most engineers would check only after exhausting the system diagnostics. The screws had been replaced. Same size, same finish, but not seated with the same torque as the factory screws around them. Tiny detail, almost invisible. Jack felt the old part of his brain wake fully, the part he had buried under oil changes and small-town repairs. He removed the panel slowly. Behind it, nestled against the communication bus, was a small matte black device no larger than a deck of cards. No manufacturer label, no installation tag. Wired into the data backbone with surgical precision. Jack's stomach tightened. "Madison," he said, voice low, "you need to come here." She stepped closer. "What is that?" "Something that should not be on your boat." The color drained from her face. Jack angled the flashlight. "This is not a failed system, it's interference. Whoever installed this knew exactly where to place it. It could corrupt data traffic, jam communication between navigation modules, maybe receive remote instructions depending on the chipset." Madison's hand went to the console as if the yacht had suddenly become unstable beneath her. "Are you saying someone did this on purpose?" Jack looked at the device, then at her. "I'm saying 30 engineers were looking for a malfunction. They missed the sabotage." Downstairs, Lily laughed at something in the galley, bright and innocent. The sound made the bridge feel colder. Madison whispered one name, barely audible, but Jack heard enough to understand. Her ex-husband was not just part of her past. He might still have his hands around her future. Jack reached for his precision screwdriver. "Can you remove it?" she asked. "Yes." "Will the system work after—" "If I'm right. And if you're wrong," Jack met her eyes, "then you get to tell me I'm not so smart after all." She should have smiled. She did not. For the first time since he had met her, Madison Blake looked truly afraid. Jack worked with the kind of silence that made Madison afraid to breathe. The bridge, only minutes ago a monument to her humiliation, had become an operating room, and the small black device hidden behind the secondary panel looked suddenly less like a piece of technology and more like a tumor wired into the yacht's nervous system. Outside the glass, Millbrook Harbor glittered innocently beneath the afternoon sun, gulls wheeling above fishing boats, tourists wandering the pier with ice cream and cameras, no one realizing that inside the richest vessel in the marina, a woman's past had reached out with electronic fingers and tried to keep her trapped. Madison stood close enough to see every movement of Jack's hands. They were not the hands of a man guessing. They were steady, scarred, deliberate, moving through the tight cluster of cables with the confidence of someone who had once belonged in rooms filled with schematics and impossible systems. He clipped a tiny probe to one wire, checked the signal on a handheld meter, then frowned. "This thing is smart," he said. "How smart?" Madison asked, hating the tremor in her own voice. "Smart enough to stay quiet when standard diagnostics run. Smart enough to imitate a communication failure instead of announcing itself. Whoever installed it knew the engineers would blame the central processor or data bus." He glanced at her. "They wanted you to spend a fortune replacing the wrong thing." Madison wrapped one arm around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm glass bridge. "Could it track me?" Jack's jaw tightened. He did not answer fast enough, and that was answer enough. "Maybe," he said finally, "depending on the firmware. It's connected to the navigation backbone and comms relay. It might have been able to monitor position data, maybe even interfere remotely." Madison stared at the black device, and memories rose like oil through water. Her ex-husband Nathan Cross smiling across divorce negotiations as if every clause were a kiss with teeth. Nathan telling her she was too emotional to manage real assets. Nathan insisting the yacht was impractical, expensive, lonely, a toy she would come crawling back from. The last time she saw him, he had kissed her cheek for the photographers outside the courthouse and whispered, "You'll learn freedom is harder than you think." She had thought it was cruelty. Now it felt like a promise. Down below, Lily's laughter floated up again, lighter than the dread thickening the bridge. Jack heard it too. For 1 second, his expression changed, softened, and sharpened at once. Fatherhood pulling him back to the world that mattered most. "Lily," he called toward the stairs, voice controlled. "Stay in the galley with Mrs. Alvarez for a little while, okay?" "Okay, Daddy," she called back. Madison looked at him. "Is it dangerous?" "Not like a bomb, if that's what you mean." "Then why did you send her downstairs?" Jack returned to the wires. "Because children don't need to watch adults realize how ugly people can be." The words landed quietly, but they struck something deep in Madison. She had spent years in expensive rooms where ugliness wore fragrance and custom tailoring, where threats were spoken over champagne, where cruelty arrived with legal letterhead. But Jack said it like a man who still believed children deserved a world gentler than the one adults kept building. He began documenting everything before removing it. Photos from every angle, close-ups of the wiretaps, labels written on masking tape in block letters. Madison watched him place evidence bags on the console like a detective, not a mechanic. "You've done this before," she said. Jack's hand paused. "Not exactly this, but something like it." His eyes stayed on the device. "Years ago, I designed fail-safe architecture for commercial marine navigation systems. We had to think about interference, spoofing, sabotage, cyber intrusion. Back then, it was theoretical most days." "Why did you stop?" she asked softly. For a while, the only sound was the faint click of his screwdriver. "My wife got sick," he said. "Emily. Cancer. Fast, then slow, then fast again. Boston wanted me in labs, conferences, test vessels, meetings. Emily needed me home. Lily needed me to still be a father while her mother disappeared by inches." He swallowed once, and Madison saw the grief move through him like weather crossing water. "So I left. We came here because Emily wanted to see the ocean every morning. She painted when she had strength. Lily learned to walk holding on to the railing outside the garage." His voice lowered. "Then Emily died. And I stayed because leaving felt like admitting the whole dream had been a mistake." Madison had no clever response, no polished apology. She only stood beside him and felt with uncomfortable clarity that she had laughed at a man carrying more loss than she knew how to name. "I'm sorry," she said. "About the paper boat. About what I said." Jack looked up then, not forgiving her completely, not punishing her either. "You were having a bad day. That doesn't excuse being cruel to a child." "No," he said, "it doesn't." Madison nodded, accepting the blow because it was deserved. Something about his honesty made her feel more exposed than any tabloid photograph ever had. Jack turned back to the panel. "I can bypass the device without destroying it. If we preserve it intact, your lawyer might be able to trace parts, firmware installer signatures." Madison gave a humorless laugh. "I came here to hide from lawyers. Looks like one followed you in the wiring." She almost smiled, then pressed her fingers to her mouth instead. "Do it." Jack slid the final connector free. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The bridge remained dead. Madison's heart sank so suddenly she felt foolish for having hoped. Then somewhere beneath the console, a relay clicked. One screen flickered, flashed blue, died, then returned with a manufacturer logo. Another screen woke beside it, then another. A chain reaction of light moved across the bridge indicators glowing green, radar sweeping in a bright circular pulse. GPS coordinates appearing as if the yacht had remembered where it was. The comms panel chimed. The autopilot display rebooted. Serenity breathed. Madison's hand flew to the console. The sound that left her was small and broken. Not a laugh, not a sob, but something that had been trapped behind her ribs for weeks. Jack watched the diagnostics scroll across the screen, his expression serious. "System is back online, but I need to recalibrate everything. Whoever installed that device forced the modules out of sync. But it works." "It works." Madison turned toward him with tears already blurring the bridge. She had not cried when the divorce finalized. She had not cried when the tabloids printed photographs of Nathan with a younger woman in Paris. She had not cried when friends stopped inviting her because they did not know which side of the money to stand on. But now, in front of a mechanic with oil on his sleeve and a child eating cookies downstairs, she felt herself breaking. "He tried to make me think I couldn't leave," she whispered. Jack's face went hard in a way that was not cruel, only protective. "Then we make sure he knows you did." The word "we" stayed between them. Madison heard it. Jack seemed to hear it too because he looked away first. They spent the next 2 hours running system checks. Lily returned with crumbs on her shirt and a chocolate smear on her cheek, gasping when she saw the bridge alive with color. "Daddy, you woke up the boat!" Jack smiled, tired but real. She was only confused. Lily climbed onto the captain's chair and placed the crushed paper boat carefully beside the glowing compass. "See?" she told Madison proudly. "I said he fixes everything." Madison knelt so she was eye level with the little girl. It had been a long time since she knelt for anyone. "He fixed something very important today," she said. Lily studied her with a child's fearless directness. "Are you still sad Jack went still behind them?" Madison could have laughed it off. She could have said rich woman things about being fine, busy, grateful. Instead, she looked at Lily's serious little face and found herself telling the truth. A little. Lily nodded as though this were expected. "When I'm sad, Daddy makes pancakes shaped like boats." Madison's throat tightened.
Does it work?
"Mostly." Jack cleared his throat. "Lily, what it does." Madison laughed then softly, and the sound surprised all three of them. When evening settled over Millbrook, Jack packed his tools, the evidence device sealed carefully in a plastic case, the yacht's systems humming steadily behind him. Madison followed them down the gangway, no longer towering in her heels, no longer armored by anger in quite the same way. The harbor lights had begun to shimmer on the water, and Serenity for the first time in 11 days looked less like a prison and more like a vessel. "Let me pay you," Madison said. Jack shook his head. "Send the device to a lawyer first. Pay me after we know your ex can't claim I tampered with anything." That is not how people usually speak to clients. "I'm not most people's mechanic." "No," she said, "you're not." Lily tugged at Madison's hand suddenly, and Madison froze before slowly looking down. The little girl placed the repaired, still wrinkled paper boat into her palm. Jack had refolded it while the diagnostics ran, smoothing the soggy creases as best he could. It was crooked, stained, fragile, but unmistakably a boat again. "You can keep it," Lily said. "So you remember boats can get better." Madison stared at the paper in her hand as if the child had given her something priceless. "Thank you," she whispered. Jack looked at the boat, then at Madison, and for a moment there was no yacht, no sabotage, no class divide, no grief polished into silence. Just two adults standing at the edge of the water, both surprised by the kindness of a child. "I'll come back tomorrow," Jack said, "for calibration." Madison nodded. "Of course, calibration." They both knew it was partly true and partly excuse, and neither corrected it. That night, Madison sat alone in Serenity's master suite with every navigation screen glowing softly in the dark, and Lily's paper boat resting on the nightstand beside a diamond watch she suddenly found ridiculous. She called her attorney in New York and said Nathan's name without flinching. She described the device. She sent the photos. She listened as the attorney's tone shifted from skeptical to alert to furious. When the call ended, Madison did not sleep, but for the first time in months. Being awake did not feel like drowning. Across town, Jack carried Lily upstairs to the apartment above the garage after she fell asleep halfway through telling Mrs. Keller about the floating castle. He tucked her into bed, placed the blue pennant Madison had given her beside her pillow, and watched her curl around it. "Daddy," she murmured, half asleep. "Yeah, Bug." The pretty lady looked less sad when the boat woke up. Jack brushed hair from her forehead. Maybe she did. "Can we help her again tomorrow?" Jack looked out the small bedroom window toward the harbor where Serenity glowed faintly against the dark water. He thought of Madison's tears, Nathan's device, Emily's voice telling him once that broken things were not always ruined, only waiting for someone patient enough to understand them. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think we can." The next morning, Madison arrived at Jack's garage with 3 coffees, a paper bag of warm pastries, and eyes that looked like they had not slept, but had finally stopped running. Jack was under the hood of a rusted pickup when she stepped inside, looking wildly out of place between stacks of tires, hanging tools, and the smell of gasoline. Lily came flying down the stairs in mismatched socks. "Madison!" she shouted as if they had been friends for years. Madison's smile opened before she could stop it. "I brought breakfast. Did you bring boat pancakes?" Lily asked hopefully. "I brought cinnamon rolls shaped like spirals, but we can pretend they're whirlpools." Lily considered this acceptable. Jack wiped his hands on a rag, trying not to notice that Madison had remembered he drank coffee black. You didn't have to do this. I know, she handed him the cup. I wanted to. The sentence was simple, but it changed the air in the garage. Jack took the coffee, their fingers brushing for half a second. Both of them noticed. Both pretended not to. Attorney, he asked. Madison's smile faded, but she did not fold. She thinks the device could prove criminal interference. If we can trace it to Nathan or someone he hired, he has a problem. Good. She also said I should hire a permanent marine technician until this is resolved. Jack looked at her. Madison, it is a real job, she said quickly. Salary, benefits, flexible schedule. You would maintain serenity, help document the sabotage upgrade systems if needed. I am not offering charity. His face closed slightly, and she saw the door she had almost walked into. Jack, I mean it. I am not trying to buy you. People with money usually say that right before they name a price. She flinched. He regretted it, but the fear underneath him was old and stubborn. He had built a life where no one could take Lily from him. No boss could demand he miss dinner. No career could swallow him whole again. Madison's offer was generous, but generosity from wounded rich people could become a cage before anyone noticed the bars. I chose this garage, he said. I chose this town. Lily has a school friend, Mrs. Keller, the harbor. I'm not stepping into someone else's world because they're lonely. Madison's eyes flashed. You think that is what this is, isn't it? The question hurt because part of her did not know. She looked around the garage at the stained concrete, the old fan turning lazily overhead, the child's drawings taped to a cabinet, the life Jack had made from grief and stubbornness. Maybe I am lonely, she said. Maybe I have been so lonely I mistook control for safety and money for choice. But that does not mean I am incapable of offering something real. Jack softened, but not enough. And I'm not incapable of saying no. Lily, sensing the tension, hugged Madison's leg. Are you fighting? Madison looked down and immediately felt ashamed. Jack crouched beside his daughter. Just talking through hard stuff. Lily frowned. Hard stuff should have snacks. For the second time in 24 hours, Madison laughed when she thought she might cry. Jack looked at her over Lily's head, and though nothing was fixed between them, something had been named. The yacht was not the only thing needing calibration. Their lives had begun speaking to each other, but the signals were messy, crossed with fear, grief, pride, and possibility. And somewhere beyond the garage doors, Serenity waited in the harbor alive again, carrying evidence of sabotage in her bones, and the first fragile promise of a future none of them had meant to start. For the next few days, everything between Jack Turner and Madison Blake became quieter, but not easier. Quiet was sometimes more dangerous than shouting because it gave people room to hear what they were afraid of. Madison still came to the garage every morning with coffee, though now she left the pastries on the workbench instead of presenting them like a peace offering. Jack still went to Serenity to run diagnostics, though he checked every cable twice because the yacht was no longer just a repair job. It was evidence, memory threat, and possibility tied together in one shining white hull. Lily still skipped between them with her toy yacht tucked under one arm, acting as if adults were simply complicated weather systems that would clear if given enough snacks and patience. But Jack could feel the tension under every ordinary gesture. Madison wanted to help, wanted to pay, wanted to step into his life with solutions that came too easily from a bank account. Jack wanted to trust her, wanted to believe she saw him as more than a sad widower with useful hands. But pride had become the last fence around the life he and Lily had left. If he opened the gate too quickly, he feared everything Emily had loved about him would blow away. On Thursday morning, the sky over Millbrook turned the flat steel color that fishermen watched with suspicion. Jack stood on Serenity's bridge recalibrating the satellite compass, while Madison reviewed a message from her attorney on her phone. The evidence device had been sent to a forensic electronics firm in Boston, and the early report was worse than expected. The sabotage unit had not only disrupted navigation, It had logged location data and transmitted signal pings through a hidden cellular module. Someone had known where Serenity was every day since Madison left New York. When Madison read that line, all the color drained from her face. "He was still watching me," she said. Jack kept his voice calm because anger would not help her stand. "Maybe. Or someone working for him. Don't soften it." Her fingers tightened around the phone. Nathan never liked dirtying his own hands. He paid people to make cruelty look accidental. She looked out over the harbor where gulls hung motionless in the wind. "I thought if I got far enough away, he would become a story I survived." Jack closed the compass panel and stepped beside her, not too close. Some people don't accept being survived. Madison gave a small, bitter laugh. "You say that like you've met men like him. I've repaired plenty of engines owned by men like him. Same principle. Too much power, no humility, eventually something breaks." She looked at him then, and for a moment the old sharpness returned. "And do you fix them?" "No," Jack said. "I charge extra." She laughed before she could stop herself, and the sound loosened something in the room. Then the weather alert chimed from the restored console. Jack turned toward the screen. A storm system was rolling in from the northeast faster than predicted. Pressure dropping hard, wind speeds rising. Serenity was secure at the main dock, but Jack frowned anyway. "You need to move her." Madison straightened. "We're Harbor Point mooring field. Better protection from the wind shift. If this comes in the way it looks, the outer dock will take a beating. Can the captain do it?" "He's off-site until tomorrow." "Then who?" Jack met her eyes. "We can." The word "we" appeared again stronger this time because the storm did not care about their unresolved feelings. Within 20 minutes, they were preparing the yacht to move. Madison changed into deck shoes and a weatherproof jacket, her hair pulled back, diamonds gone, hands bare. Jack took the helm while she handled lines with more skill than he expected. Lily stood between them at the bridge, wearing a life jacket over her yellow sweater, eyes huge with excitement. "Am I allowed to be assistant captain?" she asked. "Only if you follow orders," Jack said. "I am excellent at orders." Madison arched an eyebrow. "Since when?" Lily ignored the question with royal dignity. "What is my first order?" Jack placed her small hands lightly on the lower part of the wheel beneath his. "Keep your eyes on that red buoy. We're going to pass it on the port side." "Which side is port?" "Left." "Why don't boat people just say left?" "Because then they couldn't feel important," Madison said. Jack glanced at her surprised, and she smiled a little. For a brief golden moment, as Serenity slipped away from the dock under careful manual control, the three of them moved like something almost whole. Jack called out headings. Madison checked lines and fenders. Lily announced every bird buoy and wave as if reporting to an admiral. The yacht responded beneath Jack's hands, powerful and graceful, now that its stolen silence had been removed. He had forgotten how much he loved this, the subtle conversation between vessel and water, the way a good boat carried intention through the wheel, the way systems and instinct worked together when everything was tuned correctly. Madison watched him at the helm and saw a man larger than the garage he had hidden inside. Not because the garage was small, but because he had folded himself carefully to fit grief. At Harbor Point, they secured Serenity just as the first hard drops of rain struck the windshield. Madison stood beside Jack on the aft deck, soaked at the shoulders, breathless from work, looking younger and more alive than he had ever seen her. Lily cheered when the final line held. "We saved the boat from the storm." "We moved the boat before the storm," Jack corrected. "Still heroic," Madison said. "Don't ruin it." The wind shoved rain across the deck, and Lily shrieked with laughter as Jack swept her up and carried her inside. Madison followed, dripping water onto polished floors she no longer seemed afraid to scuff. They made cocoa in the galley while the storm built outside the yacht, rocking gently against her mooring. For an hour, the world narrowed to warmth. Rain and Lily drawing a picture of all three of them on a boat with lightning bolts overhead. Jack should have left before dark. He knew it. But the storm was rising, and Madison insisted the roads would be worse, and Lily fell asleep on the salon sofa under a cashmere throw that probably cost more than Jack's rent. Madison stood at the window watching the harbor vanish under sheets of rain. "Stay until it lets up," she said. "I'm not asking because I'm lonely." Jack looked at her. "Aren't you?" She turned, and this time she did not defend herself. "Yes," she said, "but that is not the only reason." The honesty disarmed him. He sat at the edge of a leather chair, elbows on his knees. "Madison, I can't be someone's project." "I know, do you? Because every time you see a problem, you reach for money." She flinched but did not look away. "Because money was the only tool I was taught to use." The rain hammered the glass. Her voice dropped. "When my marriage was falling apart, Nathan controlled every room we entered. He knew what to say, who to charm, who to threaten. If I cried, I was unstable. If I argued, I was ungrateful. If I left, I was dramatic. So I learned to use what I had: lawyers, accounts, contracts, clothes that made me look untouchable. Money became armor because nothing else protected me." Jack's anger softened, not disappearing, but understanding where hers had been forged. And now he asked. Madison looked toward Lily sleeping on the sofa. "Now a 6-year-old gave me a paper boat and told me broken things can get better." Her voice cracked. "I do not know what to do with that." Jack followed her gaze. Lily slept curled on her side, thumb near her mouth, her toy yacht tucked beneath her arm. Emily would have loved this child, he thought. Emily did love this child in every bedtime song Lily still remembered, in every small kindness Jack tried to teach because her mother had taught him first. The grief came, but it did not stab as sharply as usual. It simply sat beside him like an old companion. "Emily used to say Lily could make a stone apologize," he said quietly. Madison smiled through tears. "I believe it." They sat in the soft light of the salon while the storm rattled the windows, and for the first time Jack told Madison more than fragments. He told her how Emily had painted the harbor from the same window of the apartment every morning until she could no longer hold a brush. He told her how Lily had slept in hospital chairs, how the nurses had learned to keep crayons at the desk, how he had sold their house in Boston, not because he needed the money, though he did, but because every wall there knew too much. He told her that Millbrook was meant to be a beginning and became an ending, and that he had never figured out how to let it become something else. Madison listened without interrupting, without offering to fix it, and that mattered more than either of them expected. When he finished, she said only, "Thank you for telling me." Jack looked at her in the dim reflection of the glass. "Thank you for not trying to buy a solution." "I thought about it," she admitted. "I know." They both laughed softly, and the storm outside felt less lonely. By dawn, the worst had passed. Jack carried Lily through the rain-soft morning back to the garage, Madison walking beside him under an umbrella too small for all three of them. The town was waking to branches in the street puddles along the curb and fishing crews checking lines. At the garage, the lights were off. Jack's steps slowed. Power's out. Inside the apartment above the garage was cold, the old generator silent. He set Lily on the sofa, still wrapped in Madison's throw, and went downstairs to the generator room. Madison followed despite the mud and oil. "How long has it been failing?" she asked. "Weeks." "Jack, don't." He crouched beside the machine, opened the panel, and began working with a flashlight between his teeth. "I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking your daughter slept in a cold apartment because a generator you knew was failing finally failed." The words came out sharper than she intended. Jack yanked the flashlight from his mouth. "And I'm thinking this is my home, not another thing for you to rescue. This is not about rescuing you." "Then what is it about?" Caring Madison's voice broke open in the small concrete room. "It is about caring whether Lily is warm. It is about caring whether you run yourself into the ground pretending need is weakness. It is about standing here, watching you reject every hand offered because grief convinced you love only counts if it costs you everything." Jack stared at her. No one had said it like that. Not Mrs. Keller. Not the guys at the harbor. Not even Emily, who had begged him near the end to let people help after she was gone. Madison was breathing hard, cheeks flushed, eyes wet with anger and fear. "I know I have done this badly," she said. "I know I hurt your pride. I know I don't understand what it took for you to build this life. But do not ask me to stand outside it and pretend I don't see the cracks." Jack looked at the dead generator, the worn concrete, the ceiling above where Lily slept. He thought of every night he had told himself he was protecting stability while quietly allowing exhaustion to become normal. His shoulders sank. "I don't know how to need people anymore," he said. Madison's anger dissolved instantly. She knelt across from him, careful not to touch unless invited. Then learned slowly. The generator gave a sudden cough as Jack turned a valve, then sputtered alive, filling the room with a rough electric hum. Upstairs, Lily shouted, "Daddy fixed it!" Jack laughed once, low and tired. "Not everything." Madison held his gaze. "No, but some things can be made better." 3 days later, Madison walked into the garage with a folded real estate listing and a look of terror disguised as determination. Jack was rebuilding a carburetor. Lily was drawing a picture of Serenity fighting a thundercloud. Madison placed the paper on the workbench. "I bought the old Victorian on Harbor Street." Jack looked up slowly. "You bought the what?" "The house with the blue shutters. The one everyone says needs too much work." "It does need too much work." "Good. I need something that does not come finished." Lily gasped and grabbed the listing. "It has a porch, and probably bad wiring," Jack said, "and plumbing older than Mr. Thompson." Madison smiled nervously. "Then I suppose I will need someone honest to tell me when I'm making terrible decisions." Jack studied her. "Are you staying?" The question was quiet, but everything was inside it. The yacht, the storm, the garage, the loneliness, the fear that she would drift back to her world once Millbrook stopped feeling novel. Madison stepped closer. "Yes, because of Nathan. No, because of me." She swallowed. "Because I like who I am here. I like mornings that smell like coffee and engine oil. I like Lily explaining harbor rules I do not understand. I like a town where people ask how you are and wait for the answer. I like the idea of building a house that is not a performance." Her eyes held his. "And I like you, Jack. Not as a project, not as a mechanic, not because you fixed my boat, because you tell me the truth even when it hurts, and you look at my life without wanting anything from it except honesty." Lily's pencil stopped moving. Jack heard it. Madison heard it. Neither looked away. Jack wiped his hands slowly on a rag. "I'm scared," he said. Madison's face softened. "So am I. I loved my wife." "I know. I still do. I know that too. I can't offer you clean beginnings." Madison looked toward Lily, then back to him. "I don't want clean. I want real." The garage fell silent except for the ticking of cooling engines and the distant cry of gulls. Then Lily, unable to bear the suspense, asked, "Does this mean Madison can come for pancakes?" Jack closed his eyes for 1 second, then laughed. Madison laughed too, tears caught in the corners of her smile. Jack reached for her hand. Not a grand gesture, not a promise carved in stone, just rough fingers closing around hers across a workbench stained by years of repair. But Madison felt it like the first solid ground she had touched in months. Outside the harbor glittered after the storm. Serenity rode safely at her mooring, and the old Victorian waited on Harbor Street with cracked windows, bad wiring, and a foundation strong enough to hold whatever they were brave enough to build. The old Victorian on Harbor Street did not become a home all at once. At first, it was only a house full of dust, cracked plaster, stubborn pipes, and windows that rattled whenever the ocean wind came in hard from the east. Madison stood in the empty foyer the first evening after signing the papers, holding a brass key in her palm, wondering if she had made the bravest decision of her life or the most foolish one. The woman she used to be would have hired designers, contractors, decorators, and assistants, then returned weeks later to find a finished life waiting for her approval. But this time she did not want a finished life. She wanted to earn the sound of footsteps on wooden floors. She wanted to know which boards creaked at night, Which window caught the sunrise? Which corner of the kitchen would smell like pancakes on Sunday mornings? Jack arrived the next day with a toolbox, a ladder, and Lily wearing a pink plastic hard hat with stickers all over it. "I'm the supervisor," Lily announced, marching through the door with a clipboard nearly as big as her chest. "Rule 1. This house needs a cookie station." Madison laughed, and Jack looked at her from across the room with an expression that made her heart ache. He was still careful with happiness, the way a man carries something fragile after learning how quickly life can break. But he was there. That mattered more than any promise. Summer unfolded in paint fumes, sawdust, salt air, and small, ordinary miracles. Jack rewired the kitchen while Madison held the flashlight and asked questions until he stopped answering like she was a guest and started answering like she belonged. Madison learned how to sand cabinet doors, how to choose light fixtures that were beautiful but not useless, how to make coffee in a kitchen with no counters, how to laugh when paint ended up in her hair. Lily chose the color for the breakfast nook, a sunny yellow so bright Jack called it aggressive happiness. And Madison kept it because Lily said mornings should look like hope. Serenity stayed in the harbor, no longer a prison, no longer evidence, but a patient vessel waiting for her family to return. Madison's lawyers traced the sabotage device through shell companies and private contractors until Nathan Cross had nowhere left to hide behind charm. When he came to Millbrook with 2 attorneys and that polished smile she once mistook for confidence, Madison felt the old fear rise in her body like cold water. He stood in her half-renovated kitchen, looked at the exposed beams, the work boots by the door, the child's drawings taped to the wall, and smiled as if everything she loved had become proof against her. "Playing house with the local mechanic," he said. "How long before you get bored and remember who you are?" Jack moved 1 step forward, but Madison touched his arm. Not because she needed him silent, but because she wanted to stand in her own voice. She looked at Nathan, at the man who had tried to make freedom feel impossible, and for the first time he seemed smaller than her fear had made him. "I remember exactly who I am," she said. "That is why you no longer frighten me." Nathan's smile faltered. Madison placed the forensic report on the counter between them. "You sabotaged my yacht. You tracked me. You tried to trap me after the marriage ended because control was the only language you ever understood. But this time I have proof. Every wire, every signal, every payment trail. Leave Millbrook, Nathan. Leave my life. Or the next conversation happens in a courtroom where your money will not be the loudest thing in the room." The silence that followed was more satisfying than any shout. Nathan left that afternoon not defeated completely, because men like him rarely disappeared quietly, but stripped of the power to define her future. The settlement came weeks later. No public trial, no dramatic collapse. Just signatures, legal restrictions, and the final closing of a door Madison had once thought would stay open forever. That night she sat with Jack on the porch steps of the Victorian, both of them exhausted. Lily asleep upstairs beneath a blanket printed with sailboats. "It's over," Madison whispered. Jack reached for her hand. "No," he said gently. "That part is over. The rest is beginning." And he was right. The rest began in small ways. A repaired stair railing, a grocery list written in Lily's uneven handwriting, a dinner Madison burned so badly that Jack opened every window and declared it smoked beyond recognition. Bedtime stories on the couch because Lily insisted Madison did the best dragon voices. Sunday mornings when pancakes became boats, then lighthouses, then one disastrous attempt at a whale. Jack began bringing old marine diagrams out of storage, first to teach Lily, then because Madison asked him why he had stopped drawing. One evening, she found him at the kitchen table, pencil moving across graph paper, designing an upgrade for Serenity's navigation system with the focused calm of a man rediscovering a language he thought grief had stolen. "You look alive when you do that," she said. Jack did not answer immediately. He looked toward the window, where the harbor lights blinked in the dark. "I thought going back to this meant going backward," he said. "Maybe it doesn't." Madison sat beside him. Maybe it means bringing the part of you that survived into the life you have now. He looked at her then, and something in him softened. You make that sound easy. No, she said, just possible. By autumn, the Victorian had become warm in the way expensive houses rarely are. There were scratches in the hallway from Lily's scooter, mismatched mugs in the cabinet, Madison's silk scarf hanging beside Jack's oil-stained jacket, and a small framed paper boat on the mantel, wrinkled, stained, and precious. Serenity's first real family voyage happened on a clear October weekend. They sailed north past rocky cliffs and hidden coves, with Lily at the helm under Jack's hands, and Madison learning to read the wind instead of fighting it. They anchored near a small island where the beach was empty and the sunset turned the water copper. That evening, sitting on deck beneath a sky full of stars, Lily leaned against Madison and said as casually as if she were discussing the weather, "I think Mommy Emily would like you." Jack went still. Madison's breath caught. Lily looked up at them, suddenly worried. "Is that okay to say?" Jack pulled her close, his eyes shining. "Yes, Bug, that's okay." Madison blinked back tears. "I hope she would." Lily nodded with solemn certainty. She would. Because Daddy smiles different now. The words opened something quiet and holy between them. Madison understood then that love was not about replacing the person who came before. It was about making room at the table for memory, grief, and new joy without forcing any of them to leave. 6 months later, Jack asked Madison to marry him on the dock where she had once crushed Lily's paper boat. He did not kneel with diamonds or speeches polished smooth. He stood beside her at sunset, holding a simple ring while Lily bounced behind him, whispering, "Say yes, say yes, say yes." Jack's voice trembled when he said, "I can't promise a life without storms. I can't promise I'll always know how to let people help me. I can't promise grief won't visit. But I can promise I will stay. I will learn. I will build with you. And I will love you in the real life, not just the beautiful parts." Madison cried before he finished. "That is the only kind of life I want," she said. Their wedding was small, held on Serenity's deck at golden hour, with Mr. Harris, the harbor master, officiating, and Lily serving as flower girl ring-bearer and self-appointed captain of romance. Madison wore a simple white dress that moved easily in the wind. Jack wore his old dark suit, the one he had once worn to Emily's funeral and had hesitated to touch again. "Are you sure?" Madison had asked when he chose it. Jack had nodded, running his hand over the sleeve. "It was part of goodbye," he said. "Maybe now it can be part of hello." During the vows, Madison turned to Lily too. She promised not to take Emily's place because nobody could but to love Lily with her whole heart, to show up for school plays and nightmares and broken toys, to learn the pancake shapes properly, and to never make her feel like love had to choose between past and future. Lily cried, then announced loudly that she accepted. Everyone laughed, and Jack kissed Madison with tears on his face while the harbor clapped softly against the hull. Years passed, not like a montage, but like life, messy, ordinary, beautiful, unfinished. Jack expanded the garage into a respected marine repair shop, refusing the kind of success that would take him away from home, but embracing the kind that let him teach, hire, build, and belong. Madison used her business skills not to escape Millbrook, but to strengthen it, helping local businesses, joining the town council, learning names, remembering birthdays, becoming less of a headline and more of a neighbor. Lily grew taller, braver, and more herself, splitting her time between homework, sailing knots, and telling everyone that her dad could fix almost anything, but her mom, Madison, was better at fixing feelings. Sometimes grief still came. On Emily's birthday, they took flowers to the water. Madison stood beside Jack and Lily, never intruding, never pretending the ache was hers to solve. She simply held Lily's hand and stayed. That was the lesson all of them kept learning in different ways. Love did not erase what came before. It changed the way people carried it. 5 years after that first cruel challenge on the dock, the four of them stood in the glow of a Millbrook sunset. Jack Madison, Lily, and a small brown dog named Compass that Lily had finally convinced them was necessary for maritime safety. Serenity floated beside them, polished but lived in now, with sandy towels on deck, cookie crumbs in the galley, and Lily's old paper boat still framed near the helm. Madison leaned into Jack's shoulder as Lily tried to teach Compass to sit without much success. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Madison asked. Jack smiled. "When you insulted me, crushed my daughter's boat, and dared me to fix yours." She winced. "When you put it like that, I sound terrible. You were hurting. So were you." He looked at Lily laughing near the rail, then at the harbor that had held their endings until they became beginnings. "We both were." Madison slipped her hand into his. "And somehow we changed." Jack nodded. "That's what love does when it's real. It doesn't pretend you were never broken. It teaches you that broken is not the end of the story." Lily ran toward them breathless and bright, holding Compass's leash in one hand and a new paper boat in the other. "Dad, Madison, look! This one floats better." Jack crouched beside her. Madison crouched too. Together they set the paper boat on the water and watched it drift small but steady into the gold path of the setting sun. No one spoke for a moment. They did not need to. The message was there in the harbor, in the repaired yacht, in the house on Harbor Street, in the child who had believed before the adults remembered how, and in the two people who had stopped running from their separate pain long enough to build a shared future. Change does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it begins with a broken machine, a cruel sentence, a crushed paper boat, or a storm you did not ask for. Family is not only the people life gives you at the beginning, sometimes it is the people who stay and help you rebuild after the ending. And love is not the promise that nothing will ever break again. Love is the courage to stand beside someone in the wreckage and say, "We can fix what matters together."